Welcome, everyone, to the Ghost Helper podcast. I'm your host, Tina Erwin, and I have with me my friend Chloe Scolaro. And the paranormal is our normal. And so today we are in our part 3 of Reincarnation, and we're discussing all kinds of interesting stories. And we really hope you enjoy this show because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Welcome, Chloe. How are you doing?
Hey Tina, I'm great. How are you?
I've had better days, but today is going to be a good one of the good ones.
Yeah, we're gonna have a good conversation. Fun
Yeah, we
stuff.
are.
Okay, do you want to kick it off? And do you have any favorite reincarnation stories?
I have a couple. I have two from World War II.
Ooh.
One of them is because we were both in the Navy. There's a story of a man who um, is in his early 20s, and he's in the it's the 1960s or the 1970s. I know it seems like an eternity ago. And he keeps having this recurring dream of a submarine that is sinking. And I work for the submarine force, so this was kind of a near and dear to my heart story. And he's just feels terrible about this, and it's just never leaves him. So he goes to a psychiatrist who says, "Well, let's see what we can find." And he does a type of hypnosis. I don't do hypnosis, but this guy did. And he went back and spoke to the guy's subconscious. And the next thing they know, this guy is full bore on the submarine, giving the name of the submarine, the hull number, the names of the crew members, his name on the ship, the works, the day it happened, and that he died. And all of a sudden, this guy was just shocked that everything that he was dreaming was true. And of course, because it's World War II and we know what submarines we had where, and a lot of submarines simply vanished. They were hit by U-boats and they were gone. And so the upshot was they found his picture among the crew of that submarine. All the people he identified all went down with that ship. It's not like they could escape. And the flooding was terrible. And then, as you're sinking and sinking, especially in the Pacific, the boat, basically you have an implosion. And then that's pretty much it. And they verified that everything was true. It absolutely past life. Another story also involves World War II. And this man had kept, again, having this recurring dream that he was was a sailor on one of the ships during the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. I think it was 41 or 42. I think I'm tired. Didn't remember that exact date. But it was December 7th. I think it was December 7th, 41, because by
It was.
42 we were coming into the war. My history is improving.
I had to know that for a warfare pin.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah.
So
And
he
if we're
goes,
wrong, then yeah,
oh well, we're
nobody tell
close.
us.
So he survives the initial explosion because he's blown off the ship. He crawls over to an island, and his wounds were so catastrophic he dies. While they do this past life regression with him, and he describes, the same thing, the name, the ship, all the things that happened. And they looked at where he came from a small town in North Carolina. There's a full documentary on this. And he is compelled to go back and tell his family what happened to him, how he ended up on that island, because they said, well, we found your loved one's body, the sailor's body on this island. We don't know how he got there. And so he goes to the town. They knew these people were going to visit. They didn't understand. And I mean, it's a small town in North Carolina. Everyone's, very Christian. And they took one look at him. They all burst into tears. They couldn't stop hugging him and crying and telling him, "You're home, you're home." And so the person doing the documentary wanted to see, are we sure about this? And he said, yes, this was my bedroom and I hid this in this place, which had been there all this time, no one had found. Pulls it out. Well, he has a current family, parents, and they understood it's one of these things when you're faced with astonishing evidence of the reality of reincarnation, and your subconscious knows it's true because you see this person, and there's an instant knowing, an instant longing that's finally satisfied. And the grief that you had at their passing, you're still alive. These people were in their 80s. They couldn't stop hugging him and touching his hand. It was the most poignant story. And I will tell you one more story, and then we'll go back to your questions. I was at a dinner party in San Diego many years ago, at least 20 years ago, and someone knew I had some psychic ability, and it was a bunch of real estate agents, and they said, "Oh, it'll be fun. It's Halloween time. We'll talk about ghost stories." And they invited another psychic. This woman comes in, and we had the dinner party. It was very nice, lovely women. We had a lovely time, and everybody kind of moved into their own little area. And this woman comes up to me, and she said, "So what were you?" And I said, "Well, I work for the submarine force, and these are the things that I did." And she grabs my hand. She says, "Oh my God, I've been looking for you all my life." And you know how you turn around and you go, "You're looking for me?"
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You want to give me a clue here? I mean, I was clearly clueless. She says, "I died." This really was so strange. "I was the captain of a German U-boat, and we were torpedoed, and we were dying. And I started saying prayers for someone to come and help us. We knew we were dying, but we needed divine help, and you came and you crossed us all over." And I said, well, now you can hear a pin drop in the room. Everyone turns around, and I feel like I have 25 heads, and it's like, because I wasn't in a mortal body, I was a being on the other side.
So, I was just going to ask how that was going to work with the time.
Yeah. I wasn't. It wasn't like I was sitting in some room in the United States, remote viewing a German U-boat.
Yeah.
I was on the other side, and this fervent prayer was heard, and it must have been my task to assist that crew. And she said, I recognize you from helping my crew." And I thought, okay, my life cannot get any stranger with this one. This is really one for the books. And she said, I can't believe I found you. What do you say to that? I said, well, I'm so glad I could be helpful.
And you say, "Did you try the chips and dip? It's so good over there." You just.
And this woman was so sincere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even just the sincerity. It was this feeling of gratitude that she actually could say thank you. In the most horrible moment a human being, among the most horrible moments a human being could experience, she said this prayer, and apparently there was this being who appeared that she recognized as me, and I opened up a doorway, and all of her crew, she was a man in that past life, all of his crew crossed over.
Do you have any memory of that? After she said it, did it trigger anything for you?
It did not. I'm not going to pretend that it did. I've been helping the dead for a very long time in multiple dimensions, probably for millennia on both sides of the veil. I don't happen to remember every instance. This was one of them. So those are just three. They're all World War II stories. So we know that, and my theory is the reason there was so much opposition to the Vietnam War is those people had already died and come back. They were really done with war.
Yeah.
I just found that pretty fascinating. So what are your questions? What are your thoughts?
Well, following that one up, mine's going to sound awfully silly, but I was
silly. Go ahead.
I was just on vacation, and on the vacation, the TV channels were pretty limited because we were in the middle of the ocean on a cruise, and one of them was the Travel Channel. And because it's Halloween time, they had all these interesting, series of the unexplained, and they had an episode about pirates and about buried treasure. And if you really think about all that kind of stuff, it does kind of fill up to the reincarnation part of it, because if a pirate back in the 1800s dropped some treasure in the bottom of the ocean, it's not going anywhere. You know what I mean? So one of the things that they were talking about were pirates from past times had, or a ship had gone down under, and people to this day are still looking for the treasure. And I thought to myself, I wonder if anybody has ever been a pirate or sailed the seas or anything like that, and they're shipwrecked and they had really important stuff on it, or they buried treasure, or they hid something away and thought, I'll come back for this, and maybe died at some point. Do you think that we can do that and then come back in our new lives hundreds of years later, or however many years later, and find what we initially hid or lost? What do you
Yes,
think about that?
I absolutely do. And I have a theory.
Mm.
This is a theory of mine. Many people have heard of the Atosha treasure, Atocha. This was treasure from the Incas that was massive amounts of gold, coins, emeralds. Oh my God, the emeralds from the Atosha. It was
Mm-hmm.
found off the coast of Florida, and it was this Spanish galleon that was literally laden with this treasure. They were going back to Spain, and they sank somewhere off the coast of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
People had looked for it for years. But Mel Fisher was the guy who actually found the Atosha treasure because he looked in a different place. So, did he look in a different place because he was aboard the ship and he knew where the last fix was, or he had a resonance with it? And there's an interesting thing. I There's something about that treasure, I can't explain it. I own one of the replica coins from it. It wasn't an original coin. But if someone is wearing an original piece, because they've sold so much from that treasure, that the emeralds alone are mind-boggling. Well, you can feel the energy from the ship. I can't explain it. I don't know whether the energy from the Incas was so massive, but I was at Quartzsite, Arizona, obviously buying crystal, and this woman was walking by, and she had a necklace. I said, "Is that from the Atosha treasure?" And she said, "How could you possibly know that?" And I said, "Because I can feel it. I can just it's emitting an energy. The metal
Yeah.
holds the energy of who created it, and it's if you're sensitive enough, you can feel it. Doesn't matter where I am. If somebody's wearing one, I'll feel it. So I do think that sometimes you either come back because you have a resonant frequency with that ship. Oh, there's your sweet kitty.
We have a visitor who wants to join the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. So you have an affinity for that ship or that location. There was a guy who discovered he was wandering through the mountains and he kicked some dirt and he discovered all of these containers of gold coins. Well, might he have left them there in another life? I don't think there's coincidence.
Right.
And this is true for people who have relics that are passed down from family member to family member to family member. And there's an interesting show it was a series many years ago called Grimm, Grimm, and it was all
Yep.
about Grimm's fairy tales. And I've watched the series a couple times.
I remember
This
that.
is the only show I've ever seen that talked about the holy relic with pieces of the true cross that Christ died on. And the cross was shredded, and all of those pieces were put in apparently amulets, and they were spread all over the world as the Romans wanted to destroy it. Well, apparently that relic is passed down to the correct person life after life after life. I just find it absolutely fascinating. So, yes, to answer your question, I believe that's absolutely possible.
What do you think constitutes the right person? Do we know about that, or is it like a protector of the peace, maybe?
The
Like the
person
piece
who
of the
for
cross?
the person who had the piece originally at that time, maybe they were one of the Essenes, maybe they were one of the people who helped Christ off the cross
Mhm.
and helped with his body. And they were given a piece of the true cross to safeguard so that the Romans didn't destroy everything.
Mhm.
And so the thought process is, at your death, you designate someone who will inherit it, and then in the future, that person may know how to use it, but usually the person that it goes to has a major spiritual mission.
That's
And
cool.
then some people are placeholders in time, and then when the right person is born into a family, they will recognize it, and then that person will get it back.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Huh. Man. Oh, I had a follow-on question, but I got so distracted by the pieces of the cross. I was like, ooh, I'm fascinated by that.
Well, I mean, there's some major holy relics that families have held on to and passed down for centuries.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, I guess I can pop into the other. This one's more of like ghosts and possession and unfinished business, but I'm interested to hear your opinion on it anyways. On the same type of television show, I for the life of me cannot remember the names of these people right now, and I couldn't find anything about it online, which I'm really surprised about because it seemed pretty prolific on the show. But there was this woman in the early 1900s, and she was uneducated, she was a housewife, and there was no evidence of her having any like extensive knowledge of writing or vocabulary or comprehension. And her brother had died, and somebody brought a spirit board to the house and said, well, you can use this to communicate with your brother. But instead of communicating with her brother, she communicated with a spirit on the other side that asked if they could possess her to finish their writings. She was possessed by an author who had passed away, and this seemingly uneducated housewife became this like super well-known accomplished author overnight, and there was no explanation for it besides the fact that she was possessed by this person. Maybe somebody who's listening knows of the story I'm talking about, because I couldn't find the names online to save my life. But I thought that was really interesting. And there was nothing, like sketchy about it that came out. Like, no, when you hear of possession, you think crazy stuff. Nope, this person just was a writer, and she was super successful, and there was really no way of her becoming that successful overnight besides the possession. And she died like everybody else, and just pretty run of the mill stuff. But I thought that was interesting. And it's the sort of unfinished business side of things. That was kind of the whole point of the show, is that some spirits have unfinished business and they ask the living for help. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say for that.
It's funny. I just did a show with Paul Trammell and Scott Wells. And Scott Wells talked about, he's written a book about the use of a Ouija board or a spirit board. And his point is they're so dangerous, which is a point that I've made. And he had a ghost come through, and it has affected his entire life. And this is part of so there's two factors here. One, please don't use Ouija boards.
Right.
Because they are going to open up a portal, which is exactly what happened in that particular case with the writer. You don't know who's going to come through. In her case, someone came through and it changed her life, and she got all this success, but it wasn't really her success. So in a sense, she was living an untruth. There's a little bit of interesting karma there, maybe beyond my pay grade to analyze. The other factor is you don't know who else came through at that point in time. So again, I know it's Halloween, but please don't hold on to Ouija boards. The other factor is the ghost who had the unfinished business had a desire to live through another person. Karmically, she's denied that woman her full development.
Mm-hmm.
She took over so she could live again. She basically became possessive, a possessing ghost. And she didn't, it looks like she did this woman a great service because she was successful and famous. But at the end of the day, this woman constantly knew she was living a lie. She wasn't that writer. I'm not sure how that's going to work out over time, but it will be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen situations where there was a wonderful movie in the 30s called The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, which most people never heard of. And it's one of these, one of these TMC or old movies. And this ghost and this woman had had life after life together, and she came back and he didn't, but he wanted to be with her. So she never married. All he wanted to do was be with her. Well, I have a real life example of a Navy lieutenant who had the same thing. And I detail this in one of the ghost story books. I think it's the third book. I don't remember. I was in, she and I were hanging out one day, and we're in her little villa in Licola. And she says, I looked in the corner and there's a man, obviously from World War II, with a fedora hat and a trench coat. And he's standing there watching us, which is a little creepy.
Unnerving. Yep.
Very unnerving. And I'm looking at him and I said, you you have a ghost in the corner and he's watching us. Did you know that? Because I'm asking myself, how do I tell somebody, how is she going to take this? And she says, oh, you can see him. Oh, I'm so, you're the only one who's ever been able to see him.
And you said, you can see him?
She said, oh, he's been with me all my life. I love him. I'm in love with him. We have a life together. Okay. So not what I was expecting from a lieutenant in the Navy, for God's sake.
Right.
So he was always with her. He saved her life a couple times. She never dated. She never got married. She was a very fine naval officer. She made captain. She did very well respected, never married. But as the years went by, she's always operating in two dimensions because of him. And eventually it began to affect her sanity. And you can imagine if people begin to see that you're talking to someone who isn't there. It's one thing for me because I'm pretty open about it.
Yeah.
But that's not what they would expect from her. And it was very awkward for her, and he started talking to me telepathically. I know this doesn't work for you. I mean, you have a normal marriage, but it's not up to you to judge us and how we view our lives together, because this is important to us. And I was really new at this.
Yeah.
And I didn't say yes, but you're interfering with her free will. You're denying her a normal mortal life, and there's going to be karma to pay for that.
Do you know why one came back and one didn't?
I do not know that answer. And he didn't want to reincarnate. He just wanted to be with her. Maybe he didn't want to be a teenager again. That can be tough.
Yeah, fair enough. I
kind of get that.
I don't think I want to be a teenager again either.
Yeah. Who wants to do that? So
right.
Here again, we're looking at a situation where these are people who knew full well what was going on and accepted it. Like that was going to be okay.
When you saw him, did you see him in your mind's eye, or did you see him in the way I'm looking at you right now?
I almost can't tell the difference. I mean,
I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I still have a pretty clear difference between what I can see up here and what I can see out here. And the day that those blur, oh man, I'm scared.
Well, I mean, he was so, I mean, this took
strong.
This took place in 1977. So it was a long time ago. We were in Italy. And I remember I looked in the corner and he was as clear as this. I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
I could see the buttons on his coat, the sash, the stitching, the hat. I could not see his face. And
that's creepy.
He had no feet, because in the fourth dimension, there's no gravity. So you're not anchored. So that's why you see the ghost with the sheet and the eyes and they're floating. Well, because there's no gravity. You don't see their feet.
Right.
How could
she see him?
She saw him all the time.
So she saw him like you and I are looking at each other.
Yes.
That's, oh my goodness.
And
I don't think
after a while,
that.
she doesn't need to see him. She can hear him. He's always there.
That's, wow.
And that he did not possess her. He impeded her. Again, it's a little bit chilling
Yeah.
kind of case because
Well, you're never alone.
you are never alone. I'm thinking, it's more than sees you when you're sleeping. This is
Yeah.
really so when you have a ghost that's there all the time, like the movie The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, which is based on reality, these things happen, or her case, which was a real case. It's the only time I've ever come across that one. Then you are committing to a person who has no life. It's the whole
Yeah.
vampire series. It is so romantic, but you aren't experiencing a whole mortal life.
Right.
And that actually slows your spiritual progress. Professionally, she moved forward just fine with her military career, but her spiritual career, her growth as a person, that it just didn't progress.
Yeah. Do you know whatever happened to her? Did you lose contact with her after that
I
time?
lost contact with her. Yeah.
Wow. That is something else. I can see pretty sometimes it's very clear and sometimes it's just flash, but man, I've always been pretty straightforward about like I don't want to see anything in my doorway. I cannot, and I still do anyway, but it's just uh that I think that I'm not there yet in my spiritual abilities to be
And
able to stomach it.
it it it's very hard when you're first starting out
Yeah.
because you're having to come to terms with operating in two dimensions
Mhm.
when you're seeing a ghost. And this isn't the show about ghost stories, but this begs the question, okay, you see this and it's very unnerving for you.
Sometimes I can see behind me, which is so weird. That happened when I was on the cruise ship. I was walking and I could see something behind me. And I was like, what the heck is that? Like, it's so fast. It happened so fast. But I was like,
Well,
whoo.
it does because you have to remember when you see in a different dimension, the concepts of time and space don't exist.
Hmm.
So you aren't blocking the ability to see behind you. And when you have it's called psychic vision or psychic sense, you're seeing globally around you. I mean, I've walked into my bedroom and I saw my neighbor who killed himself, the week before, sitting
Jeez.
on he's sitting by the window, on the floor looking really sad. And, I dealt with him. And then I had my neighbor who died in a motorcycle accident. I walked into my office and there he was. And it's like, dude, you should have crossed over. He said, I can't. My family's holding on to me. You got to help me. They're never going to let me go. Okay.
I think the moral of the story is I don't want to be your neighbor. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is funny. That's a
Right.
lot, man. That's a lot to.
I have an odd life.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. Well, there was another thing that I wanted to talk about that I wanted to see what you thought about. Back in the old days, and I'm sure you know about this tradition, it's pretty well known, when they put coins on people's eyes when they pass away. This is in the spirit of Halloween. I guess we're talking about reincarnation and going back and forth. But there was a show about that as well, about where they used to put the coins on people's eyes so that they could pay a toll to get into heaven or to get to wherever they were going, or whatever angel of death was going to come collect them. They collected their payment to cross over. What do you think about that?
That goes back to the Dante's Inferno, which is crossing the river Styx. You had to pay the boatman to cross over.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. And um, because people understand that when we when we talk about someone who's died, we instantly separate body and soul. We put the body in the ground, but the soul moves on. I hope they moved on. I'm sorry, where did you think they were going? What is, so, and everybody's death is as unique as they are.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, everybody thinks that death is the same, but there's many, death experiences as there are personalities. I mean, it's unique for you, it's your experience. And I think that, the paying the boatman crossing the river Styx goes back to old mythology. It goes back to old England and a lot of the old mythologies. But in all the times I've crossed over ghosts, I only saw the boatman one time. And it was so weird to see this. I don't ever see that, but I crossed over my mother. I was
It was
having
your mom?
It was my mother. I was having a
Oh
very
my.
difficult time. So I called, and because it was my mother. So I called my brother, and then we called my sister, took the three of us. It was very difficult. And I think it's because it was so personal.
Yeah.
And I can, because I'm the remote viewer, they're providing prayers and massive spiritual assistance. She's in the boat with the boatman.
What
And
does he
there's,
look like?
it's, he looks like an old, to me, it doesn't mean that's what everyone sees. To
Right.
me, he's an old guy with a hat, a very wise and experienced man. And there's the river Styx stretching before us to get to the other side. But the other side was not a place of light. And so, I mean, I love my mother. She was a good person, but she also played a lot of games. And, you know, I'm kind of done with games. And I looked at her and she said, I was so upset you refused to play the game anymore. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to play the game anymore. There's no place to go with this.
And this was a
And
conversation you had when she was in the boat or when she was
yes, she's
oh
in the
wow.
boat. She can see me, and the boatman is there, and he's about to cross her over to, I don't know what this is. Like she knew where she was going.
But you didn't.
And I didn't know where she was going. I suspected it's one of they call them blister dimensions in the lower astral. That's the name I give them. I don't know anyone else uses that term, but it's my term.
Wow.
People say in my father's house are many mansions and they talk about God. Let me
Yeah.
assure you, in the lower astral, there are many locations. They're not mansions, let me assure you. And I thought, no, I don't want you to have to come back and play this ridiculous game again. So
Mm-hmm.
I brought in teams of angels and I directed that she be crossed over right then and there. And then the boatman vanished and the river vanished, and what was on the other side, it just was gone. Once the light side arrived and enveloped her with this beautiful light, she was a good person. I mean, we all have our quirks.
Mm-hmm.
She deserved, not, it's not about deserving. I wanted her to feel the warmth and the compassion of the light. It's what I would want for myself. And I certainly wanted that for my mother.
Right.
Of all the people in the world, I needed to be helping my mother.
Yeah.
And I did that. All three of the four of us did that. And it made a huge difference, I feel. I don't have to worry that I don't know where she is or what she's doing or what did she cross over into. It was the only time I have ever seen the boatman and the river Styx.
That is so I have never heard anybody talk about that.
Yeah.
I was just shooting blanks, something, just bringing
Well,
up
hey, you
something.
keep going, girlfriend, because this is good questions.
That is crazy. Because you see that stuff, you're like, oh, is that real? And your mom didn't, you guys didn't obviously put coins on her eyes, I assume. So,
No, she died in a hospice in North Carolina, and um, we gave them copies of the grief book. And, they were so good to her, and as
yeah.
she was a very kind group of people.
I think that people who work in the death industry like that are their own form of reincarnated angels, man. That is tough, tough work to do that.
It is. You see a lot of interesting things
Yeah.
about what happens at death. So, but speaking of reincarnation, have you heard about this little girl who everyone is now believing is the reincarnation of Mozart?
No. Is this current happening?
Yes, I think
No.
she's 12 now. This child, when you look up child prodigy, she's above that.
Mhm.
She knows all of the compositions that Mozart did. She can find the fault in each one of them, and she's rewriting. And I think at the age of 10, she had been completely rewriting one of original new opera. And all these people are singing her opera. Can't believe. I think her name Martha. I don't remember this child's name. She's in Germany,
Oh wow.
and she is such a genius. She can't stop composing. She goes outside to play, and she hears all these melodies. She's listening to nature. She hears the melodies, and she comes in. She is a complete prodigy. She had to have lived before. If she wasn't Mozart, I don't know who she could have been, because she is absolutely on the money with the perfection of his music, which is some of the highest frequency music in the known world is Mozart.
Do
Can
you
heal, it can heal cancer and everything else.
I'm gonna look up his death date really quick because
It was
I don't know.
18 something.
1791.
Okay, I was close.
That's crazy. I mean, maybe he lived, came back at a different time too, but that is. Do you
She knows,
think?
not only is she a prodigy, she can conduct. She writes all the parts for all the opera singers and every musical instrument in the symphony orchestra. She writes every musical part for every instrument. Who does that at 10?
That's
Unless
crazy.
you have come back and you've got all this knowledge and you just have to start using it. And that's
Well,
where child prodigies come from. They lived before, they don't have to start over.
I think that children remembering past lives is the most interesting thing to me because it's one thing to be an adult and to remember because not that it could be swayed, but we've lived much longer than kids have, obviously. But when a kid can come back when it says some crazy off the wall stuff that they have no way of knowing, or they have no way of ever living before, and you just are like starstruck by what they just said, that to me is insane.
Okay, let's start with a 3-year-old. 3-year-old walking with his grandmother, and he says, he's 3. He says, Grandma, the last time I was born, it was a stillbirth, and I died, and I was so afraid. And the grandmother is pretty shaken by this. And I said, how are you feeling? He said, well, it was hard to come back. So this child, there's no filter. They just tell you. The
Hmm.
conversation went on, I guess, for about another hour with her, as it was related to me. And she is pretty savvy, so she was very comfortable talking to him and gently questioning him and holding his hand and giving him hugs when he needed it. And his birth this time was a little rocky, but he made it. And he's still afraid something might happen, but as each year goes by, he's feeling better. And then I was asked to remote view him at one point because he woke up in the middle of the night. I get odd phone calls, screaming, a scream that parents had never heard before on a level that chilled them to the bone. And I got to see what happened to this child. And
Oh,
the reason he was a stillbirth is the birth didn't go well. So the doctor is in a hurry to do the cesarean and basically cuts the baby. The baby bleeds to death and dies. They told the mother it was a stillbirth, but the surgeon killed the baby.
oh my God.
The child was reliving it. And it was horrifying, to be blunt. I try to have detached compassion, but I am going to tell you this was horrifying to
Yeah.
witness. And I had to calm his subconscious and tell him this won't happen to you again. You're fine. You are fine this time. You're safe. And the word I got back was he stopped crying like somebody turned a switch. He was all right, and it didn't happen again.
Wow.
So it's a handy little skill now and then.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. I almost, It's interesting to know that that's real, but I almost don't want that for my child because that's a lot to carry, as a little person going through
Yes, but
that.
you're looking at a little person. The
Yeah.
fact is, the soul, we don't know how old the soul is. We all have to
Mm.
start somewhere, and we start all over again. So you're looking at, a 3-year old or a 6-year old or an 8-year old, but that soul could be very, very, very much older. They have to go through this new process as part of their growth.
Mhm.
It's not something you can stop.
That's an interesting perspective. It's crazy to think that your child's soul could be older than you because, in the real world, our ages are number based in terms of,
Yes, but you see
usually.
all these shows where the kid is so much smarter than their parents,
Oh,
or their
yeah.
parents are children in adult bodies, and the kids are so much wiser than the parents,
Yep.
even as little kids.
Yep.
So, they were different people at different times. And we're hearing this is happening more and more and more frequently. There was a little boy who came out recently and he died in World War II in a plane crash. He was a pilot. He
Mm.
could describe it in detail, agonizing detail. We're seeing this over and over and over and over again. There's a in Virginia Beach, I think it's out near Pungo. You probably know where Pungo is. They sell
Yep.
strawberries and blueberries anyway.
Yep.
There's an aviation museum,
Mhm.
and there's a story about the aviation museum in one of the ghost story books. Because my niece went there and she said, I think that I came back with somebody. And he has all of these airplanes from World War One and Two. And through her, I didn't have permission to remote view the guy's museum, but through my niece, I was able to hear all these dead pilots, some of whom are still with those planes, and talking about what their thoughts were at that moment in a dogfight going down, how they felt about the war. Why are they doing this? I was a choir boy and now I'm killing people. Why does war make us all murderers? I mean,
Right.
some of the conversations were chilling for me to hear them. That's why I had to write them down. People don't know what what did we do to normal people when we send them to war?
Yep.
And why do they have problems when they come back? Because now there's this feeling that is constantly pulling at them. It's a very difficult thing.
Yeah, that's hard. That's very hard. Wow. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about when you were mentioning the Mozart reincarnation is, you always hear people say, "Oh, my daughter or my son is an old soul," or "I think that it's my grandmother reincarnated," or, somebody famous from the past like Mozart. How do you really know? You know?
You don't, because we live thousands of lives.
Right.
There's half of Hollywood is, Elizabeth Taylor, or Marilyn Monroe or
Right.
Theda Vera or somebody. And there's all these people who think that they're the reincarnation of Edgar Casey. I haven't met anybody yet who would fit that qualification because none of them are humble. And Edgar Casey was the epitome of humility.
Right.
I, Edgar, if you were really Edgar Casey reincarnated, you would never say that.
Right.
Who was Edgar Casey was considered the most documented psychic in the history of the United States.
He
He
has a
was
museum or a convention center in Virginia Beach.
he has the Association of Research and Enlightenment,
Okay,
and
that's
they
what it is.
published the ARE book company published my first book, The Lightworker's Guide to Healing Grief. And then I became an Edgar Casey scholar, and then I did um, shows. I did radio for them for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Anybody
Wow.
needed a show, they called me. So I learned a lot about this truly remarkable, super spiritual man who read the Bible every day of his life. When you look up the word humble, there was Edgar Casey. Kind, I mean, kind to a fault, just a remarkable man.
Yep.
So, okay, so how do you know when someone has come back? I don't think you should know. A lot of people want
Mm.
to be Cleopatra. I would not be that woman. Be who you are. If you remember who you were in another life, then okay, do better this life. Maybe you remember who you were. I remember 7 past lives. Big deal. In this life, I'm doing better than the other lives. I'm
Mm-hmm.
living longer, so that's a good thing. So if you're a math prodigy, maybe this life you get to do something wonderful and productive with that skill. It's not people talk about, oh, they're such a gifted mathematician, or they have the gift of fill in the blank. Not a gift. They earned this life after life after life.
Right.
This life, they get to do something with it. They get to make a difference with it. Hopefully, it's a really positive thing. They don't have to sit down and go 1 + 1 is 2. They're now looking at, boards full of mathematical calculations. But maybe they didn't use it to the greatest good in a past life. Maybe they use it in a detrimental way. The beauty of karma is you get to try again. Maybe this time you're using this amazing ability for a much greater good. That's our hope. It's like this woman who's doing beautiful, beautiful music. God bless her. She's trying to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I did a radio show, again, for the Edgar Casey Center, and there was a discussion of reincarnation. That was the whole discussion on the show. And the host talked about he had this affinity with his grandfather, and people said he looked his great grandfather whom he didn't meet, and he was a slave and he did this, and and I just feel like I know him. And I said, big mistake. I said, well, maybe you were your great grandfather. Maybe you just came back. When you do radio, you don't get to have dead air.
Right.
He couldn't speak. It so struck him. He said, I talked to him. I mean, I've known the guy for years. Really good guy, Ron Mills. That's who it was. It was his show. And just the finest, you look up really great guy, that's Ron Mills. And he said, that rang so true for me. It's like you put this big puzzle piece together in my life that no one else had done. They say, oh, well, I guess so. No, 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 no. This was major, huge. And he said he finally came back. I had to kind of fill up the space and then apologize for upsetting him. And he said, no, I think I needed to hear it because it changed my perspective on everything. I saw myself differently. And now I understood my grandfather because I now had a very different life than he had. I'm a different person. I have a different life and I'm making a difference. He's a really fine man. So, yeah.
That's crazy. Do you ever have the feeling, I have this strange feeling sometimes where I have people in my family and I'm very, very close with them in this life, but I have a weird knowing and feeling that whenever they pass, I will be closer to them, if that makes sense. Have you ever had that before?
No.
I don't
But then
like,
again, I don't have 100% of all the feelings you could have.
well, yeah, you're right. That almost just seems backwards. Like he feels very close to his grandfather who had passed prior. I feel very close to somebody who's in my life now, and I know that when they pass away, that I will almost be more connected to them than I am now. And I don't know why I feel that way. I felt that way for a long time. I always just know it's like whenever they pass, it's almost like, I don't know. That's a weird
Well,
one.
hopefully you'll get to cross them over.
Yeah.
And in the act of crossing over someone that you're close to or you despise, can be either one.
Right.
We don't always know. In that act, you have the potential to help them in a way they might not have ever received before,
Mm.
of opening up a doorway of light for them they might not have ever imagined. And to me, that's miraculous. We can actually perform what for them would appear to be a miracle of having somebody help them into the light. That's a possibility. I've crossed my father and my grandfather over together. And I didn't know my grandfather because he died when my father was like 7 years old. So I had no
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of the man. But I went to help my father and found my grandfather in addition. And in crossing them both over, it's as if this darkness lifted from both of them. Even though they were good men, they were decent men. Sometimes, even if you're a really good person, there's this darkness that it's like this stickiness, like soot.
Mm-hmm.
But they're free of that now. There's a cleanliness. The light cleans that away from you. People are afraid of death, but when you follow and move into the light, it cleans your soul in addition to restoring your soul. It's not to be afraid of death. People aren't really so much afraid of death, they're afraid of the process of death.
Yep.
And or not dying what they would term a good death, which I actually had a
Or the
ghost.
uncertainty.
The uncertainty of it, and I mean it's going to happen to everybody sooner or later.
Right.
If you already know what your plans are, it's like plan ahead. You already
Yeah.
know what your plans are, that's going to shift everything and make a big difference.
Oh, this is kind of a goofy one. You just said plan ahead and think about your plans, and it made me think about that. This is so silly, but it is Halloween, and I had somebody who's a skeptic ask me this question because we were watching a show about zombies. All my good ideas come from outside sources, and they thought, "Are zombies real?" And I was like, "What kind of question is that?" And they said, "You should ask Tina if zombies are real." And I said, "Okay, I guess that makes sense." And that kind of goes into reincarnation because you think everybody passes away and you come back. In this show, they were talking about how they used to bury bodies with almost like booby traps, for lack of a better word, because if this person tried to rise again, they would be impaled by something or they were restrained in their coffins or whatever else. How out of the realm of possibility is something like that?
Well, that is a challenging question. So
Mm.
let me put my tap shoes on with this one. We're in a time where the potential for something as crazy as that might be more of a reality when you look at some of the nanoparticles that are being injected into people right now.
Mhm.
Those nanoparticles are then self-assembling inside a human body. Now you've got satellites that blanket the world in a grid. You can activate the nanoparticles. They self-assemble. How much are you controlling what people see and think? A lot of people aren't the same as they were 5 years ago, wink wink. And if that is the case, they're not dead, but something's taken over. So what we're looking at is a zombie, they come back to life. Well, isn't that what the Egyptians thought? They
Mhm.
mummified their dead because they knew they were preserving as much as they could, including the DNA. It's as if that DNA, they were going to come back and use it somehow.
Right.
I think there was a lot more that happened, and have been to Egypt from one end to the other. A whole lot more went on there in times before we have real knowledge. We don't really understand what they were doing with the mummification process, but that process is repeated in Central America, in South America, and I think in some places in China. So people were preserving, because if you look at the Egyptian Book of the Dead, because I think we all read that, of course.
That was on my 8th grade reading list.
Of course, I cannot tell you that I've read the full Egyptian Book of the Dead, but
Right.
it was to look at how your soul had progressed through life. And they had the scales. If you're so Here is a feather. If you were done heavy things, your soul would not be light. But if your soul was as light as a feather, then the ka, what you're basically your subconscious, you could cross into, you could cross into what I would call the heaven world. The Egyptians had another name for it. But the actual concept of zombies, a lot of that goes back to voodoo ritual, where they would use certain types of psychedelic drugs, and people thought that their loved one was dead, but they weren't. They were simply in a catatonic type of state, but they could be programmed through it, almost like a type of hypnosis. And we know that part of that is true because of what happened in Russia. I would never have known this. But in the 90s, there was an article in the San Diego Union Tribune that was printed. It was a reprinted article from TASS in Russia when it was still Soviet Union. And they had these black magicians who would walk up to people, hypnotize them so quickly that person would take them back to their apartment, give them every valuable they owned, or go into someplace financial institution, because during the time of the Soviet Union, there really weren't banks. There wasn't credit. There were no credit cards. That's when the Soviet Union fell. They had to redo their entire banking system. So and the Soviet Union fell in, I think it was 1986 when the Berlin Wall came down. And we had Glasnost, we had Gorbachev, and all of these things had to set up a banking system. Well, after they began to set that up, and it was in the 90s, they would walk in and empty their bank accounts and give them to these magicians. So they had the ability to do a mind control of these people. What if you could do that on a massive level? What if you could put something inside people that you could create a program, like a subroutine in the brain? The person doesn't know it's there. They don't understand exactly why they're responding the way they do. Gee, what if that was possible? What if it's not science fiction anymore? So are zombies possible? I don't think raising people from the dead is possible, but I think who a person has been might be abrogated at this point. It's a very complicated answer to your question.
It's a good answer to the question.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a really good answer to, is there something called, like the undead getting risen from the grave?
Well, I think a lot of people could use that to terrify and control.
Yeah.
But the whole zombie thing really only manifested with voodoo and Santeria, especially in the New Orleans area. I never heard of it. I never heard of a single Native American talking about such a thing. Not that I've studied every Native American tradition, but let's face it, we've all been around long enough to know enough about Native American traditions that they didn't have that.
Right.
They didn't have that in any of the Native African traditions. I don't ever remember reading anything about this in Chinese or the European or the Norwegian, the Scandinavian tradition. So much less India. So let's take a really global look at where is this only prevalent with this one particular frame of reference.
Demographic. Yep.
That demographic. So if we kind of narrow it down, where's the real issue? It's not really anywhere else. Certainly not. I didn't hear anything about that with the Canadians, and I'm sitting right on the border. The Japanese don't talk about that. I mean, think about it. Southeast Asians. I'm doing a global search here, not getting anything. Only that one tiny geographic area on the planet and in Haiti.
Oh my goodness gracious. Restless kitty cat over here. Man, he heard zombies. He got all freaked out.
Yeah.
No kidding. Well, is there anything you would like to tell the people about reincarnation that we have not covered, or something that is super important to you that you want people to know and really know?
Do not ever let a psychic tell you who you used to be. Ever. Someone says, "Oh, I can feel that in a past life you were." Stop them. Say, "Don't tell me. Do not tell me." Because you're allowing that psychic to influence you in an extremely detrimental way. In fact, there was a psychic who told this woman that her father murdered her in another life, and that, she should shun him. Well, in this life, he's the best dad you could have ever wanted. But this woman believed the psychic. It didn't matter that her father had 35 years of being a wonderful dad. She shunned him. He never understood why. Because of that psychic. Psychic earned terrible karma, but so did the woman. Because she gave her power to the psychic and basically screwed up 2 lives.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let somebody tell you you're a great healer from Atlantis. If there were that many great healers from Atlantis, nobody'd be sick. Let's
Mm,
just use some common sense here. So I really appreciate that question. Didn't mean to launch, but it's a really it's kind of a pet peeve with me. Pay
it's good.
attention. If you want to find out a past life, use a practitioner who's done past life regressions. I've done lots and lots of them. And I don't use hypnosis, but who goes and helps to prompt you without poisoning the well. It's like, don't say, "Do you see pink elephants?" You've now poisoned the well. That's all that person's going to see are pink elephants. So
Right.
you have to be really skilled how to take a person through a regression without telling them what they are seeing. And then you have to help them afterwards understand what it was they saw and interpret it. And remember, a past life regression, you can't tell anyone else you saw. If you saw somebody else from this life in that life, you can't tell them because then you have hurt them by poisoning the well for them.
Right. When you do past life regressions, do you see what they're seeing
Yes.
every time or just sometimes or
Not everyone can do a regression. It's as if somehow their subconscious blocks it. Those Most of those people are rare. I've only found one or two. For the most part, as the client is telling me what they see, then I'm able to see a little bit of it through their eyes. But when you do a regression, you get vignettes throughout one lifetime. If you've led 1,000 lives, you're not going to see 1,000 lifetimes
yeah.
in one regression. And you have to also look at, usually you're going to see how you died. For some
Yeah.
people, that's extremely traumatic. An awful lot of people died really traumatic deaths.
Yep.
A lot of people were cannon fodder. They died in their 20s. Most people have never lived this long.
Yep.
It's kind of an interesting concept.
That's interesting.
So, anyway, I would say if you're going to look at past lives, look around your home and see what surrounds you. What's your interest? That gives you a clue that you might have had a time there. And you don't need a past life regression. You need to focus on doing your very best in this life with the people who you are with and who love you. Even the people who are difficult, work through understanding them the best you can. So that would be my thought. So I guess we're good.
Yeah. I think I think we can put a pin in this one for a little bit.
I think so too. So, Chloe, thank you so much. So, for those of you who are listening and want to know more, ghosthelpers.com, contact at ghosthelpers.com reaches me. I've got all kinds of books that are available on ghosthelpers.com. And when you click on them, they take you right to Amazon, or you can go directly to Amazon. And if you have any questions, write to me. Let me know, and Chloe and I'll put together another show because this is so much fun. It's our mental popcorn release for the day.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me on again. I love being here.
Thank you so much. I think we're a great team. Bye
I
bye.
agree.